Good evening and welcome to another art stream with myself, Pharaoh, and Alexander Adams. Alex, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Diversity is our strength, comrade.
Yes, sadly Panama may or may not be joining us, but I'm sure he's thinking about his love of the nation of Israel right now. How are you doing this week, Alex?
I'm doing fine. I finished off my text for the event, which we should mention, the event which is happening at the end of August in the Midlands, a 3-day event at which we're both speaking.
Yes, and hopefully, I think we may be speaking back to back, so you're going to get wall to wall, top quality content. Have you? I haven't actually asked you this yet. Have you decided on your title yet?
Yes, I think it's sort of Vanguard's visions and networks for the dissident creators or something like that. Yeah,
that's very cool.
Thank you. If you, by the way, I actually talk about the abstract in an interview that was published by Skildings or Shieldings Events. So if you go to the YouTube channel for that, or if you go to the events page for Where Do We Go From Here, you will find links to that video interview.
Yes, and there's quite a few of those interviews going out as well, so make sure you check it out to catch up the latest with your content creators. Like, was there anything interesting apart from your interview on there that you found at all? Did you have a chance to check out anyone else's?
Poe and Lambda have their videos up at the moment, and they're both fun. They're a bit shorter than mine, so you'll be able to get through them quicker. But you can put me on 1.5 speed, you know.
Oh dear. Okay, wonderful. So just recapping where we're at. Obviously, it's been a little while since we've dived back into to Dali, but it's nice. Gives us a little bit of a break in between each time. We've seen a couple of different aspects to Dali. We've seen Dali the young man exploring different artistic styles, a man who's on the edge of society, at the cutting edge of art, involved in various avant-garde groups. And then we've seen Dali in America, the kind of the darling of the rich American elite. You know, this is kind of the birth of his kind of commercial career. He's diversified from, you know, I guess kind of more traditional types of fine art into things like we saw the sofa, we saw him kind of decorating a shop front. You know, he's sort of embracing the American dream in a big way. But towards the end of the last stream, we saw this kind of the beginning of the third era of Dali, which is kind of like his sort of return to some kind of Christian thoughts. And we caught a glimpse of a couple of some of his great late Christian works as well. So, Alex, is there anything you want us to kind of say in terms of recapping Dali and you know, just things we've learnt so far?
Yes, so this is him back in Spain. He's come back from the USA. He came back to Spain in, I think it's 47 or 48. And yes, he's now married to Gala, and he announces that he has become a nuclear mystical painter who is going to produce religious paintings. At this time, of course, he was also producing more work commercially, and that's something that we're going to get into, him branching out into becoming a pop culture icon, which happens really in the I think for most of the world it happens in the late 50s through to the 60s and the 70s. In America, he had kind of like a cult following already from the 1940s, but we see sort of his brand goes worldwide in the 1960s, basically.
Yeah, and I guess to kind of kick us off in that vein, we've managed to find some of his adverts from that time period. So I'm going to start sharing, and let's dive into some of his works. Just give me a second. All right, can you see this?
Yep, looks good.
Yeah, so one interesting thing that someone brought up in the first stream was around chubs, and how Dali apparently designed the logo for chubs. And I've done some investigation into this fact, and it is partially true, although from what I found, it's not entirely true. And
so you're like Ferro as fact checker, but status partially true.
Yeah, exactly. I've snoped it, and by that I've plagiarized other people's work to find out
with
the
a political
truth.
bent. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very topical. But what I found is that basically the story is that he met the head of Chubs at like a restaurant, and then he just drew the logo onto a napkin and was like, "There you go," and that was done in '69. And from what I can see, is that this was the evolution of the logo. So I think what Dali effectively added is this kind of flower style bloom around the Chubs. So you can see before it was Chubs, then it was Chubs, but fundamentally the fonts were already sort of decided historically. So I think all he's done is to add in the kind of circular, like, I mean, I think it is iconic at the same time. And then you can see in the 90s where they kind of copy both of the fonts. I think that's the right decision. Gives it that kind of homogeneity at the same time. It's a nice, but I think by the 90s it's a nice bit of branding. But you can see there's some real mess at the top. You can see it's almost too curvy. The use of the like that C almost becomes an E. Yeah. It's just it's got this kind of lilt on the way the letters are written as well. Is there a special name for that in terms of like the do you know what I'm saying? There's like a curvature.
Yeah, the curve. Yeah, I don't know what that would be called. A graphics specialist would be able to say. Yeah,
and then the S is like got weird kerning as well. Sometimes there's a bit of a space. It just is. It's a hot mess till '63. And then I do think he kind of pulls it together. So yeah, there you go. Dali helping logo design in '69
in the most minimal way possible.
Well, what's interesting about logo design is that often it's just the smallest things make quite a big difference, and actually, it's a really hard thing to do. I find, or like hard to do well, and often, you know, some of the best logos are just a simple silhouette or a simple shape. You know, like what's clever about the shape is that it alludes to the kind of circularness of the object, and also because it's tied into the placement on the item at the top of the lollipop, it just instantly makes you think of that you're looking at the top of the lollipop. So again, I think it does work. But like you said, logo design is one of those weird things where people will spend like £100,000s of pounds to like make it a flat lay, you know what I'm saying, to make it super graphic. Have you seen all of the kind of evolution of Starbucks and stuff?
I might have seen them before.
Hold on a second. I'll just here we go. It's actually hilarious.
Yeah.
This is a bit of a piss take, but it is actually true. But it starts off they go in '71, but they like going from the 2011 rebrand was like $200,000 to go from this to this, basically. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like one of those
just
things
a cropping exercise, yeah.
Yeah, it is, exactly. And it will continue to crop. Anyway, a small aside there on logo design. Let's look at some commercials. So I've got the impression that I got was that he would basically just do anything that would give him cash. I don't know if you heard anything about it.
Yes, that's basically it. That is essentially it. He was not financially literate, but he loved money, but only because it was a status symbol. He didn't really understand money. He didn't really have much interest in money. He had no interest in finance. So he was basically, just basically taking whatever money was on the table, which would be his undoing later on, as we will see.
Yeah. Okay. I accidentally played that a few times, so apologies. Can you hear this?
Now tell me the truth.
Yep.
Don't you think a knuckleball is much harder to throw than a screwball?
Oh, no, Whitey.
Whitey Ford and his new friend Salvador Dali always fly Braniff. They like our food, they like our style, and they like to be on time. Thanks for flying Braniff, fellas.
When you got it, flaunt it.
Tell him, Dali, baby.
Oh, that was one of the worst adverts of all time. So you've got.
Oh goodness.
I guess the concept was it was like a juxtaposition. The guy was having like a conversation about baseball, and you're like expected to be some kind of manly American on the flight, but it's actually Dali. And then I just love Dali comes in,
Whitey Ford
just like a madman. He's probably talking about nothing whatsoever.
They like to be on time.
Well, as he said, the only difference between me and a madman is that I am not mad.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell him, Dali, baby.
Also, that's a great line there. Tell him, Dali, baby. Tell him, Dali, baby. Okay, I give that a 2 out of 10. Terrible. Okay, here we go. Next one.
En esta tierra hay eso, un veterano sabor. Veterano tiene eso.
Un veterano sabor.
Oh, I love this.
Okay, so that's a Spanish advert for, I don't know what, brandy or port?
I think it's port, yeah.
Port, okay.
Okay, we have to watch this again. This is actually genius.
En esta tierra hay eso, un veterano sabor.
So you're going to start off with Dali on a ladder with a stick, tracing out Spain. I think the actual port. I think it's like Portuguese or something.
Oh, is it Portuguese? Okay.
I think so. I'm trying to remember when I was looking at this up originally, and then I sort of love this shot as well. It's kind of reminiscent of some of his scenes, you know. So you've got the port, you've got the kind of objects in this desert landscape, the kind of tree coming out of some kind of other object, a seashell, etc. And then because it's just like the dirty Spaniards. It's just like get the good looking woman at the end, but. I think there's a part 2 as well. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at that. Oh dear.
Live streaming can be tricky, and sometimes trying to.
Yes, it can be tricky. Yes. Funny you should mention that.
En esta tierra hay eso, un veterano sabor. Veterano tiene eso.
Un veterano sabor.
I don't think it's as good as the other one. But what I quite like about this is it's kind of like they sort of leave Dali in his habitat. It's Dali almost as this kind of magician figure, and then again they're trying to pull in some of his work. Like that was quite a good shot of the product in the Dali-esque landscape, and I don't know that the woman at the end is quite a catchy jingle, basically almost like a what's it called? Veterano,
yeah.
Yes. What's
I think it is. It sounds like Spanish to me.
It's Spanish, is it? Okay.
I think so.
How do you rate it?
I don't know. Actually, that's not too bad compared to some of the other adverts. That's really not too bad.
I think they understood his spirit quite well and sort of were like he's what was quite good is they didn't let him speak. So he's again
they don't make any demands on his acting. Although acting wise, he was supposed to be cast as the Emperor of the Universe by Jodorowsky in his version of Dune, which sadly never came to pass.
Yeah, that's so sad. But no, I quite like that one, and I think they respect his kind of artistic credentials quite well, and bring it in to create something a bit interesting. Certainly not cringe. I'll definitely give that a strong score. Here we go. Next one.
Je suis fou du chocolat l'envers.
Okay.
Ooh, they kind of crashed his last line, didn't they? They cut it off at the end.
Did they? What?
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
they came in with the orchestral sting quite fast.
Yeah. So I guess it's almost. But is this before Clockwork Orange? So when's this? 68.
Oh, yeah. So that's a few years before. Yeah.
Because this is obviously Ludwig von B, isn't it? You've got this kind of
Yes.
dramatic
Yes,
shot
that's right.
where,
Yes, yeah.
where it's all about the product. So Dali coming out, turn the sound off. He then eats the chocolate, which then turns his moustache up. And do you know what it's saying?
He loves the. I'm mad about the chocolate of Lavin.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah.
That's quite.
So of
Again,
course,
that's
playing on the idea of him being a madman or an eccentric. Yeah.
yeah. That's quite a good tagline, and it's good like fontage and stuff there at the top. Again, I think that again that's quite they play into his his kind of attributes quite well. His talking is limited to just shouting at the camera. I mean, I think the moustache part is without a doubt slightly disturbing. Basically, changing immediately to this kind of weird animatronic face.
Well, but that was actually a robot. That's a mask, model head, and I think there might have been another advert where his head goes all the way round.
Oh, another land vision.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think there are two versions.
Okay, I do not have the second one, I believe. So apologies. There we go. I mean, I think this is good. In my opinion, it's not as good as the port. I have a special love for the port, but this is quite good. I wonder if Kubrick took, some of the Beethoven stuff from there. Just putting out there. Okay, next one. Alka-Seltzer.
First, it dissolves. Happy bubbles, but devoted bubbles. Then the Alka-Seltzer shoots into the stomach. Here, it neutralizes that bad excess acid. Meantime, the specially buffer aspirin is feeding into your bloodstream to all places of pain. So those beautiful places will feel beautiful again. Alka-Seltzer is a work of art, truly one of a kind, like Dali.
So yeah, it's Dali explaining Alka-Seltzer, and they've got him dressed to some kind of wizard. And then it's him doing some kind of like live artwork, showing today you've got all of the kind of like low tier CGI renders of the of like Alka-Seltzer going around. Dali is the original version of that, just like a real.
You've got one of the masters of surrealism here, and he's acting as sort of as a CGI as a proto CGI artifact. Yeah, and I thought, and the problem is, I think that when you look at the next shot has a close up of the body, and it looks incredibly ugly. It's just all sort of smeared and horrible gloop on it, and I don't want to feel like that, to be honest. If I'm taking one of their products, if I felt like that, I think that would be a definite deterioration of my condition.
This is what Alka-Seltzer is doing to your body right now.
Yes. That's not appealing.
Okay, no. Again, I just don't think the Americans really get Dali. I think they're just like, oh, let's just let him do something crazy, and then it's just.
They did that, yes.
This is the saddest shot of all time. Him sort of holding up the model like a prize fighter. This is sad. This is making me sad. Poor Dali.
Rich Dali.
Yeah. Well. Okay. Peppermint.
Maître, serait-ce ton intérieur habituel?
Je l'use uniquement dans des moments de très grand compromis sentimental. Le titre, c'est un destin aphrodisiaque. Dans chacun des vers doit contenir du pipermine. Et à l'intérieur de chaque viscosité piperminesque, afin qu'au moment de cristallisation du pipermine, Les yeux paraboliques de mouche restent gravés comme dans un fossile atavique.
So he's talking about sort of atavistic fossils and flies, and then getting covered in money. Oh no, getting was that money or was that peppermint?
It was money, I thought.
It was money. Lying on a bed of money.
I thought peppermint is like the drink because he's talking about his jacket, isn't it? Yeah, the jacket,
aphrodisiac jacket, which we saw in
last time, yeah.
I believe, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's just
they're letting him loose. They're letting him do his thing.
Yeah.
Credit to them.
I don't think
is this an effective advert in your view?
No, this is like a weird advertorial. But then I like him being covered in cash because there's that. That's just like
that should be the thumbnail for this last part.
That is literally what Dali's trying to do right now. Just cover me in cash. I want to receive my payment in a bed of cash. Yeah, there we go. Not great.
Not dissimilar to what actually happened.
Yeah, exactly.
As we will learn later on.
And this is a Datsun, which is a American car manufacturer.
No, Japanese, but that might be the American branch.
Salvador Dali is an original man. So when we commissioned an artist to introduce our new Datsun 610 5-door station wagon, we asked Mr. Dali to paint a portrait of this Datsun original, a luxury economy car. The only thing it shares with other economy wagons is a low price.
Absolutely original, different, sensational.
Find out what makes the 610 a Datsun original. Drive a Datsun, then decide.
Apologies. So apologies for my not knowing it's Japanese.
Oh, it was Nissan. It's basically how Nissan traded in outside of Japan in the 1950s to 70s, and then they changed to Nissan.
Okay. So we start off with like a low tier version of one of his paintings, and then the Datsun arrives in the horizon, and it sort of hoovers up the art. In some ways, that's kind of fitting. It's literally destroying the art with its presence, and
it's leaving you with nothing else to look at, which I suppose is kind of wise. Yeah.
This is it. This is art giving way to commercialism here right now. This is actually quite deep. Then you've got Dali in the car, sort of looking out, and then he's just saying random shit like original car. Oh, this is pretty cringe. This is pretty bad. I think he's pretty desperate. This is 72 by this point. I think he's really out of money. Also, I like the idea of a luxury economy car. We're just going to put words together now. This is our expensive cheap car.
Yes, Salvador Dali never drove a vehicle in his entire life. He was not registered to drive a car. I can tell you that much.
Also, they mentioned that he was going to do a painting, and I was expecting to see a painting of the car, and he never does it. But what he does do is he takes a large canvas out of the back of the car. I mean, obviously to show like how perfect the Datsun is for artists carrying canvas, obviously.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
And then he takes it out, takes a look, lifts it up and down, turns around. That's it.
And disappears with the money and doesn't provide the art.
Yeah, exactly.
How symbolic.
There we go.
Well, I mean, that's very. I mean, the product isn't Dalinian at all, but the advert is relatively Dalinian, don't you think?
No, I mean, I think that's like the most sellout one. I mean, I think it was all thought up by some madmen in America who were just cynically using his work. Like literally, okay, the best order is Veterano, number 1, Lanvin,
yep,
number 2, What's number 3? Maybe Money Dali, because it was obviously boring.
Just for that last shot.
Just for the last shot. Then it's got to be this one. Just for, let's get the line again.
Tell him, Dali, baby.
Tell him, Dali, baby. Tell him, Dali, baby. And then I don't know if this is worse than the Alka-Seltzer, because this is just such a sad moment in Dali's career right now. Just imagine, you've been recognised as a world artistic genius, and you're having to explain like low-tier pharmaceuticals in America by
bicarbonate of soda.
Yeah, by
You're
just
explaining bicarbonate of soda to Americans.
by spraying spray cream on some random bint. I'll do the. I think the Datsun is better than that. Alka-Seltzer is definitely the worst one.
Yeah.
Please post in chat what you think the worst one is, and we'll maybe look at them later. Okay, enough of those terrible commercials. That was very, very depressing, very sad. But I guess it kept him afloat during the wilderness years.
Well, yes and no. I mean, he never really struggled for money at this stage. So he's well and truly okay, well off. Yeah. So we got onto the Ecumenical Council. Did we do the Last Supper last time, or?
I think we did, but
well, okay. But basically, the Last Supper was 1955. You'll see it. Okay. And it was collected by someone called Chester Dale, who was an American millionaire, and he's got a fantastic collection, including some Degas paintings and a brilliant Picasso Saltimbanque, the Acrobats from 1905. So he bought this painting, and basically, when he died, he bequeathed his entire collection to the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. And the Washington, D.C. Museum didn't really want this painting.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, well, they had a problem because it was 1955. If you hung it chronologically, this would be surrounded by abstract expressionism painting.
Mm.
So how do you explain this to your visitors, that basically you've got something here that looks like a film montage being painted in the 1950s, where Jesus Christ looks like basically a Hollywood actor. And it was not considered a very successful painting, and so the museum will kind of try to hide it because they didn't know what to do with it. It is now on display, or it was when I visited a few years ago, and it's got a decentish space, but it's sort of it's in a sort of foyer area. They don't want to hang it next to anything else. Because it's kind of difficult to position, and so Salvador Dali's work becomes very difficult to position in this point because he's no longer surrealist. So when he's a surrealist, he's part of a large movement. He's part of a political, social, literary movement. Now he's kind of on his own, and it's very difficult to sort of put him in context because there was no one prominent doing this sort of art. So yeah, I mean, what do you think about this as a painting? Do you think this is successful?
Yeah, it's really interesting because obviously, I think what an artist taking on a subject is always thinking about the hundreds of other people who have done the same subject. So you're living in that living tradition or context. And again, if you were to ask someone like what painting would you like to do, I'm pretty sure like the Last Supper would be one of the least chosen, because it's something that's been done a lot and done very well in many different contexts, and also with a Renaissance master as well. So that's already, I think, mentally to be able to go and say I'm going to do the Last Supper tells you a lot about Dali's confidence. But also like his real attempt at trying to do something a little bit different. Now, just in terms of the layout, obviously it's Christ at the table, but there's a few interesting things in my view. So comparing it to Da Vinci's is all everyone's on one side basically. I think there's people around the edges, but you've got these two figures at the front here. So it's kind of similar in terms of like structure, with Christ at the center, but everyone's on one side. In Da Vinci's, it's all about those like little conversations, these little vignettes in the bigger piece. While with this, it's all about Christ here, because there's a total lack of action. There's a prayer going on at this time. Also, interestingly, that the table has been removed of everything apart from a glass filled with wine, bread which is broken in two. So obviously you've got the foreshadowing, and then I can't see what this object here is, but something else on the table. We'd need to look into it. What's interesting is actually the structural spacing here. So again, it's all about again creating lines and numerology here, and in my mind, it's to do with triangles. So you've got the figure of Jesus, two apostles at the front. You got Jesus and the broken bread. You got Jesus and the apostles to the right. So he's creating these shapes using the various figures. You've got the triangles coming through some of the tops here. I'm pretty sure this is meant to represent Judas, who again in traditional medieval painting would be represented with a yellow robe. Then, if we look at the background here, he transports us totally outside of the context. I mean, Jesus himself already is not the kind of dusky, bearded Christ. He is this kind of like blonde, Western, handsome-looking chap. Well, it does sort of look like everyone else has it. Maybe is like a little bit more Middle Eastern. So again, it's interesting how he's taken on Christ as this almost like you said, Hollywood Americanized figure. Then everyone has been transported into what looks like some kind of like future pod, where they're molded into. This is something like the scene you would see of like a fancy restaurant today, where you've been placed in a pod in the middle of a lake somewhere. So the setting is obviously just like this is actually quite a surreal, mystical moment. And then you've got this form above at the top, which I presume is the Father. Interestingly, no Holy Spirit. So often that there'll be the kind of triple depiction inside a painting. But again, this kind of it's interesting that the kind of hands, because you've got things like when in Daniel, when the Persians capture Babylon and then use the silver from the temple, there's that kind of hand of God appears on the walls. So again, it's like God is never kind of manifest fully. It's just this like kind of just the arm is enough to kind of show his grace, and it's kind of the arms are over the entire scene as well, but his arms also form a triangle at the same time. So I really like it as a work. I think what's striking to me is if this is done in the 50s, this sort of reminded me of quite a lot of 70s like fantasy art. I know it sounds a little bit weird.
Oh no, that's true.
But it's
they were drawing especially on Salvador Dali paintings, so they came from Salvador Dali.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because it has that kind of like maybe kind of like it's like the cover art for Conan and that I know and that kind of fantasy stuff has that kind of realistic but again surreal qualities to it. So I think it has got like a pioneering element to it, but like you said, it sort of doesn't fit in with everything else. But I quite like it.
I mean, I've got two observations. One is that you notice that Christ is dematerializing, so he doesn't cast a shadow. So he's sort of like transcending at the moment that he announces that his death is forthcoming.
So you can see here everyone else has got they're kind of blocking out the light, and then the lights on the table. Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, really.
And also,
so you can see the boat behind him as well.
And you see the boat.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. And also 11 apostles. So the 12th one is what? I don't know, taking a photograph or something. I mean, am I wrong? I mean, there are supposed to be 12 apostles.
I wonder if it's this guy here.
But
Thaddeus. No one knows about him at all. Gets left out again. Poor Thaddeus.
yeah. So what? So there's one missing.
No,
And
I think
he's the one holding the camera, or
I think he's here. Can you see this little triangle of cloth there?
Oh no! You no. That's 11 apostles. I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay, it's interesting. This is why fishing boats in the background, obviously, referencing fishes of men, and several of the apostles being fishermen as well.
Leave your thoughts in the comments.
Yeah, if you like it, if you like Jesus in a space pod in a future restaurant, basically. Yeah. Interesting piece though. Okay, and then following this.
Yes, so here we have the Ecumenical Council. Let's have a look. 3 meters high by 2.5 meters wide from 1960. So by this stage, Salvador Dali was trying to make these grand religious pictures, and he was using assistants. So at this point, he started using, I think it was 2 assistants in the 1960s. One was Isidore Bay, and the other one was Antony Pitchot, a member of the Pitchot family, who we mentioned in part 1 of this stream. So basically you have the sort of nuclear mysticism. So you have like sort of figures dissolving. You've got floating figures, which is the Salvador Dali thing, which has been going on for since the mid 40s. And here his compositions become extremely diffuse, sort of uncentered, and so you have like sort of combination of elements which are relatively unrelated. Which are sort of pictorially unrelated. Thematically, they may have connections, but in terms of space, they're floating around in space. And of course, you have Gala at the center as I don't know, the church's mother or something, or I'm not sure that she is actually supposed to be the Virgin Mary in this painting. So I
think she's just a saint. So obviously, the Ecumenical Council is
an embodiment of the church, perhaps.
Yeah. So Ecumenical Council is meeting of bishops, and you can see them across here. We've got the kind of Catholics on the left here, and you can see some Orthodox with their patriarchal helms on the right. Mm-hmm. That's not a real word.
Protestants not counting, I guess.
All of the major ecumenical councils were before Protestantism existed.
Before the Reformation. Okay.
Yes, and to be fair, it'd be interesting. Like, I'm pretty sure they'd all be wearing the same headgear. They were much more Eastern, obviously, like Nicaea, for example, is in Turkey today. So it would be much more Orthodox vibes. But like I said, it's a really strange painting because you've got the horizon, the horizons down here with Dali. The Dali like self-reference is sort of reminiscent of some what would you call it, like Baroque. It reminds me of Velázquez when he's doing that self-portrait a little bit. Is
Las Meninas,
yeah. So I wonder if it's kind of like referencing that Spanish influence, but then it looks totally different. It's just the form of him looking over his shoulder is very similar. The horizon line is right at the bottom of the painting, which is really strange. He has got that kind of pool of water versus against a hard rock surface, but he's not doing anything with it in terms of like playing with it or creating shapes with it. So it's kind of like almost irrelevant. You've got Gala, a pretty good. Not too bad interpretation. I like a quite weird gawky hand here on the right hand side, but like you said, as a figure, undisclosed figure. But you've also got other figures here. You've got this other female with a large cross. She's kind of like appearing almost out of the sky. So is this like a vision from the sky? Maybe that's it, because Gala definitely feels like the most solid thing there. So it's kind of like almost she's like a conduit for him having the vision in the clouds. Because again, maybe that's more like it, because there's several references to seeing when Stephen, when he's being martyred, he sees a vision of heaven in the sky, and that's what I wonder if you're seeing here, that the clouds themselves are becoming this vision. We have got like a triangle again coming in here, bishops in the middle, figure on the left, figure on the right. Again, this is what you typically see with representation of the Holy Spirit as a dove or a burning bird above the head of. That looks like another woman, and then in the center you've got this again strange and dark figure. So again, normally in an arrangement like this, you would have either Jesus or like a representation of God the Father. But this isn't a representation that I've seen before. I mean, maybe it is the Father again, because he's trying not to show the face. So again, that's that kind of ethereal quality. But then he's got this kind of quite classicized figure. And again, there's this darkness at the top here where he's holding out the hand almost in pain. You can't see the head. So it's quite disturbing, actually. And then you've got some more bishops at the top here. So I can't really place this at all. It's very strange, and again, like a mishmash of styles. You've got this kind of hyper-realistic at the bottom here. You've got this almost abstract where the kind of cloths, the folds of her cloth become lines which mold into the sky itself, and then this very dark figure in the center. The kind of cave as well. There's something kind of foreboding about it, but it is obviously a church at the same time. Very, very mysterious though. So in terms of that kind of hitting the mythical, and I guess it would be quite impressive as well to see this in person due to its size.
Yeah.
Okay. Next week, should we move on? Next one.
Okay, so I think we can go through these next ones fairly briefly. This is Portrait of My Dead Brother, 1963. You may remember that I mentioned in the first stream that Salvador Dali had an older brother who died before he was born, and this was supposedly a portrait of him. In fact, this isn't a portrait of his brother. His brother died when he was about sort of 6 or 7 or something, and this is clearly of an older boy. This is taken from a photograph of someone else, we don't know who, and probably looking at the Ben-Day dots, then we can assume that this is taken from a photograph, a newsprint photograph. Yeah. Sorry.
This is the atomistic part to it.
Yeah. So this is Ben-Day dots as figures, also as sort of nuclei or molecules. So it's a combination of it's like some of the paranoid critical ones, critical images, where you have material acting in 3 different ways. And Dali was particularly proud of this painting because he said that this sort of this kind of sort of prefigured pop art, which was going to arise in America. But of course, by 1963, artists had already started using Ben-Day dots, like sort of 1 or 2 years previously. So actually, it's probably him getting this idea from the pop artists. So he's not quite as innovative as he claims he is, or as his fans tend to claim he is. Although he's extremely flexible. He's very responsive to ideas, but he's not always first with these ideas.
Do you want to just explain the dots to those?
Oh yeah, so the Ben-Day dots is just it's how they used to print black and white photographs in newspapers, where they couldn't do grayscale. So what you would just do is you'd do a dot, and the size of the dot would define the tone. Yes, it would define the tone. So a very small dot would leave a sort of a relatively white area. A very large dot would make a dark area, and if you place these together, you could define a face in terms of dots. And
yeah, I mean, it looks quite clever. quite like a face, although there is that kind of deathly figure, like deathly quality to it, because the dots sort of merge together like the dark sockets of a skull. Interestingly, you've got these kind of almost conquistador-esque figures down here, which then become the dots themselves. So again, maybe talking about that kind of Spanish heritage or whatever. You've got these kind of floating dots, which again look like they've got little faces on in their own right, or they've turned into people. You've got his hair coming in, becoming part of this kind of like large crow. And then the kind of atom, and then a couple of cherries as well. So he's playing around with the dots and having a bit of fun with it at the same time.
So, also you've got the Millet's Angelus going through different formats in the background. It's also worth mentioning that if you're amazed at his skill, this is not to downgrade it at all, but he was using light projectors. So he was taking images, photographic images, projecting them onto the canvas, tracing the elements on the canvas. Then you turn off the light source, and then you've got sort of like basically you've mapped out everything in terms of photographic accuracy, and then you just paint to fill in the outlines.
Interesting. What's the general feeling about using? Because I have heard some comments on that and like light boxes and tracing and stuff like that.
It's a very big subject, and maybe something that we could talk about in a future stream, because the camera obscura, the camera lucida, lenses and so forth have been used by artists since at least since the 17th century in Holland, probably the 16th century in Italy, because there is this thought that Caravaggio used lenses or mirrors in order to make his sort of hyper-realistic paintings of figures. And there are certain clues that suggest this. Hockney wrote a book called Hidden Knowledge, which was basically saying that what happened with Van Eyck in the 14th century, early 15th, yes, early 15th century.
Yeah.
That's right. That what happened was that these advances could only have been done through mirrors, and that this explains the sort of the hyperrealism, the explosion of hyperrealism in Netherlandish painting at this period. This has been sort of contested. It's an interesting theory. I think that Hockney perhaps goes a little too far, but there was a lot of influence from artificial optical devices, and it has been used. I mean, like Vermeer used it. So, I mean, if you want to get sort of purist about it, are you willing to ditch the paintings of Vermeer? I think that they can be used. They can be used well or badly. It's like any other tool. It can be used well or badly. It can be used lazily to cover up absence of skill. Salvador Dali was an extremely skilled craftsman, but he also liked to play games with technology. He also liked to take shortcuts, and he became extremely lazy in his later years. So how you want to sort of place this painting in that sort of spectrum is up to one's own judgment.
I did hear a similar thing to that Hockney on Van Eyck, where it was all about like spectacles. Is that what you mean by lenses? Like,
well, yeah. I mean, you can sort of you can take an image and you put it through a lens, and this can be projected onto a surface, onto a large surface or a small surface. You can also use sort of there's sort of the painting grid, which is basically a grid which is set up in a frame. It's basically threads over a frame, and then there is a place where you put your eye, and you basically see what's in each square. And if you have drawn these squares on your piece of paper or your canvas, you can transfer what you see very, very accurately. And this was something that was used during the Renaissance. Dürer has a famous picture of a person using a drawing grid. It's a big subject.
Like I said, so I've heard something slightly different then, where it's like someone saying that the innovations around spectacles and glasses gave them the ability to do that. I'm not that
Yeah,
convinced.
well, yes. I mean,
personally.
in terms of the camera lucida, I think that is true because the lenses were not good enough to be developed until the 17th century in Holland, which was where the breakthrough with lens technology took place, and that's why you see artists like Vermeer using the camera lucida to make paintings.
Okay. Anything else to say on this one at all? I mean, I think it's certainly interesting, and again, it goes quite. It's something quite different to some of this other kind of like religious mythical style. Though it's quite dark, and I think there's a sadness to it, the forebodingness. Look at the kind of cloud at the top. The dots almost look like they're kind of raining down, like raining blood, don't they?
I think this is one of the more successful paintings of this period.
Yeah. It's cool. I like the conquistadors turning into the dots. That's interesting. Okay, nice.
Okay, so we have the hallucinogenic toreador of 68 to 70, I believe. Let's just have a look. 68 to 70. So this is considered perhaps one of the last great paintings by Dali. Again, this was made using assistance. This is quite a large painting again. I don't know the exact size, but it was probably about sort of 2.5 meters, 3 meters high. I think maybe Panama wanted to talk about tuna fishing, which is another painting from around this period, which is also quite a strong picture. And again here you have the hallucinogenic toreador. Toreador is a giveaway because that will tell you that Salvador Dali was not an aficionado of bullfighting, because a toreador is a term never used by Spaniards. It's always a matador.
Okay.
So here you have the toreador appearing from a bust of the Venus de Milo in an arena with flies as dots hovering over the arena, which forms his hair. You have image of Gala in the top left. You have
as the head, or this here?
Oh yeah, no. Yes, at the top, yeah, and then that's the Venus de Milo again, of course.
Okay.
And then if you go down lower, you'll see the bull, and so you have the bull, the head of the bull, and you have the flies coming out towards us. And bottom right, you have the famous image of Dali as a child, which with the hoop, and you'll remember that from Spectra's Sex Appeal in second or first stream. And at bottom, I think it's a bull. It's either a bull or a Dalmatian dog at the bottom. Again, this was done using optical projections, so that's why he's able to get these very accurate depictions of objects. Also, you get the regularity of the dots and so forth. But so these could be sort of planned in advance and then just projected onto the canvas.
Okay. It does have that kind of quite projected feel to it. I don't think I can't really explain why, but. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, if we talk about some of the themes, again, it's kind of like beauty, death. The flies representing, like sort of gathering around the dead form of the bull here. They're kind of creating this kind of zonal field of flies. There's reference to childhood and Dali almost kind of like watching on. So again, is this kind of like a memory from his child? Yeah, you've got the kind of the roses, and maybe the kind of the kind of beauties will be loving the successful matador.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of floating head is typically associated with John the Baptist. If you remember the surrealist, a symbolist Moreau stream has a famous depiction of that.
de Chauvenet, and yes, yeah,
as well. Yes, yeah. So there is that kind of religious element to it. There is this kind of atomistic shapes here. The structured cubes, etc. The flies becoming like little atoms buzzing around, and also references to I can't remember the exact name of it. That flat architecture style right back at the beginning of his.
Metaphysical art. So that would be Giorgio de Chirico and fascist architecture in Italy.
Yeah, exactly. But it's definitely interesting. Again, this almost has like a movie or like a photo collage style feel to it. Again, maybe it's from using the camera, whatever the projector. Do you know what I'm saying?
This would be either a slide projector or an overhead projector, transparency.
Yeah. But it reminds me of like when you kind of overexpose a couple of images on top of each other and creating some of these effects.
You have this problem with Dali in that he's trying to fill up the space. He's trying to repeat his forms so that you understand his forms. So when they become distorted, you also have a knowledge of what the distortion is. So you can't do the head in the middle without doing the Venus de Milo relatively undistorted and so forth. So he's got this thing. He has to repeat the image, and he's also trying to fill up the space. And you do get the feeling that his pictures are becoming very, very diffuse, and he's just sort of putting stuff in to fill up space. So if for example, what is the significance of Gala's head? I can't see a reason to have it there. But of course, it would look a little bit empty in that corner.
Yeah, you're right. It's like without it, you've got all of the weighting on this side from the two heads.
Yeah,
and he's tried to balance the colours as well, the yellow with the blue, and because of the weight, because again the flies are on this side. You're right. I think it's a bit out of touch. I wonder if this is the matador here, sort of over the body of the dead bull, and he's kind of like having almost descending. It does feel like a couple of ideas thrown together on a bigger piece, and you're right in saying he's trying to connect it together, but it just doesn't work, does it? It's interesting though.
Yeah,
I call it this little flying little bug thing down here, and again. So was this picture of Dali as a youth? Is this from somewhere else that he's added in?
I'm not sure if this was actually him. He was photographed wearing a sailor suit when he was young, but I'm not sure if this is actually from that photograph or if he's just sort of appropriated another source. But he's recycling stuff. So at this stage, he's constantly recycling his own images. This is actually relatively original because you've got things like the flies and the dots that you haven't seen. You've got the bull and so forth. I mean, Dali wasn't interested in bullfighting at all. So he's trying some new motifs. So he's not entirely repeating himself, but he's getting a bit tired.
The dots reminds me of Hearst, actually, just the coloured dots.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And this is the time of op art as well. So he's getting this. So he's getting this. Bridget Riley was doing stuff with dots in the mid 1960s. Salvador Dali was quite savvy. He spent a lot of time in Paris and New York. He saw publications. He visited galleries every so often. Mainly to try and make himself the center of attention, but he did see an awful lot of art. So his finger was on the pulse. So if there are reminiscences here of op art, which was a current movement, then this is absolutely deliberate. This is because he's seen this and he's thought, well, I can use that too.
Okay, interesting, but maybe some of the cracks really starting to show in his work.
Yeah, okay. So this is him painting. This is one of the sessions where he was there rather than his assistants were doing it. So this is sort of 1969 or so. Yeah.
I guess it shows the size. If that the Venus is like the size of a physical human being here, that's pretty impressive.
So I mean, you can't blame him for using assistants for a very large painting, but it becomes a much bigger problem later on. So at some stage we're going to come across the name of Gerrit Douw, who was a 17th century Dutch painter. And Salvador Dali in 1970 went to Paris and saw a big exhibition, which included paintings by Gerrit Douw. And he noticed that there were two versions of some paintings, and he spotted, because he had quite a good eye, the paintings weren't quite the same. So it was obviously they weren't copies. There was something going on. And what Dali suggested, and I believe he might have been the first person to suggest this, was that these were stereoscopic paintings. So these were two images that were designed to be looked at through glasses. And if you were a kid, you may remember the stereoscopes where you would put on the little glasses and you would hold up the slide, a kind of a slide thing to the light,
yes.
And you would have two different photographs, and they would be very slightly different, taken from different angles. So it gave the illusion of 3D. And I don't know if this has been done with the Gerrit Douw paintings, but there really does seem to be that sort of thing going on in those paintings. But anyway, this inspired Dali to start making stereoscopic paintings himself. Now, at this stage, he was painting very slowly. He was starting to take medication, so he was not on his game at all. And he was getting old, and he was doing a lot of other stuff as well as painting. So you can imagine he had now had to make not only these super fine, super detailed, super accurate paintings, but he had to make two of each in order to make a stereoscopic painting, which overloaded him. And in the end, he only did, I think it's probably less than 10 stereoscopic paintings. And here you see one of the paintings that he did, and this is unfinished. He didn't even get as far as this on the other painting. So he did his two paintings, and he couldn't even finish this one. This is from 1973, I believe. Let's have a look. So this is 1972 to 1973, and this is unfinished. And this is, I think, I'll be honest with you, I think this is pretty much the last painting he did, which will raise a few eyebrows because there's 10 more years of painting before he officially stops painting, which raises the question of who was doing the paintings if Salvador Dali wasn't. By the late 1970s, he actually had a very serious tremor in his hand, so he couldn't paint. He literally couldn't. You can see signatures from the late 70s and the early 80s, and he's shaking. He can't even write his own name, so he can't paint. So what was happening was, I theorize, and in Gibson, his biographer theorizes, that what was happening was his assistants were painting images either inspired by Dali or suggested by Dali, and Dali was claiming them as his own work and selling them, or more often he was actually keeping them for his new museum, which he was, the Teatro Museum, which he was constructing in Figueras.
Let's talk more about the assistants painting in a second. Just going back to this painting, the stereoscopic is really interesting. So you're saying he had 10 sets? Is that 10 sets of two, or is that 10 in total?
Yeah, theoretically there were. He finished. I think there's about 10 finished stereoscopic pictures that were done from about 1970 through to about 1980, and some of them are actually quite simple. And they are like sort of the illustrations you'd find in psychology textbooks on perception. Okay, and there are shapes and things that, or you have like a single object floating in space, and it's seen from slightly different angles, and the rest of the painting is kind of abstract. So it's actually quite quick to paint. This was one of the most elaborate ones, and I think he kind of undid himself that he just couldn't finish it in the end.
Yeah, it's kind of reaching the kind of limit of visibility at that time, which is
So you can see that the face of Gala is uncompleted. That's actually the last bit, and he couldn't quite finish that.
Yeah. There's also, like, again, perspective-wise, there's a few things off. It feels to me like some of the chairs don't feel right. So again, I wonder if he's struggling a little bit at this point as well.
I think maybe it might be a composite image. He may have had two photographs. Or a sort of combination of photographs. I think it probably was one photograph, which he had to alter in order to make it look 3D. And so he'd sort of, I think he probably manually done it. He'd sort of done it by eye, and that's why the things don't look quite right. Is because he's actually shifted stuff a little bit deliberately.
There's a bit of uncanny valley to it. I mean, just in terms of layout, this is referencing some of his earlier work. You know, Gala looking out to the sea, his sister looking out as well. You've got the boat across there, but also it is like some of those Dutch paintings like Vermeer, etc., where you've got the kind of light flowing in from the left-hand side. The composition of two people, again, is like a classic Dutch motif. You've got Gala in the sailor outfit. As well.
So by this stage, she's well over 70, and she's got the Mickey Mouse bow in her hair. And
it's a real nana now.
Yeah, which makes you feel a little bit queasy, but so I should mention that Gala is so Gala is a very controversial figure. She was driving Salvador Dali to produce as much work as possible, because basically she was spending a lot, as I mentioned at the end of the last stream. She was spending a lot. She had lovers, even at this age. She had lovers who she was lavishing money on, and so there were lots of problems with money. Anyway, I don't know if we want to get onto that now, or whether you want to say any more about the painting.
Just last thing I'll say, but the color scheme, it does remind me of some of his the mystic style paintings, where again there's kind of like light blues. Sorry to skit around here. You're gonna got light blues, greys, purples. So again, it's definitely in that kind of blue spectrum, which gives it kind of this like light and airiness feel to it as well. But I quite like the color scheme in it, and the light's good. It's just needed a bit more work, and I don't know if it would have worked with the stereoscopic.
It's relatively rare to actually view one of the stereoscope paintings. Always reject all. It's relatively rare to whatever they're asking, always reject all. It's relatively rare to actually be able to view one of the stereoscopic paintings properly through the lenses that were designed, because obviously it can't be reproduced in a book, so you actually have to be physically there. I think there was one exhibition where I saw that was the Paris exhibition about was it 7 years ago or something. And I think that they work relatively well. I can't remember being overly impressed.
One last thing. The frame of this, again, is very like Dutch Renaissance as well. So again, he's got those few little hints, which I quite like in it. So I actually think this isn't too bad at all. It's just a shame he wasn't able to finish it off. But yeah, it's almost got this like airbrushed feel to it, because it's just so light, and the light is so diffused as well. So okay, do you want to talk more about Gala? And I'm actually like, I was being really nice and be like, oh, isn't she an old dear? But actually, she's just some kind of demonic.
She used to spit at waiters and bite them. She could be. She was not an old dear by any stretch of the imagination. And I don't want to character assassinate her, because she was a complex person, but she could be vicious, and she was greedy. And at this stage, early 1970s, they were in a serious mess financially, because they were getting paid in cash, and they were carrying undeclared suitcases full of cash through New York and Paris. They had different bank accounts in different countries. They were, I think Panama Hat was going to talk about sort of the relationship with Franco as well. So he was extremely stressed. There was a point in the 1970s where Franco executed some striking miners, and Salvador Dali kind of merrily suggested to a journalist that Franco should kill more strikers, and This was not received very well. There were threats against his life. There was a bomb placed at his favorite restaurant. He started to, his manager, oh God, the managers, right. Okay, so we had Peter Moore, who was a British manager who kind of made a lot of money and made some very questionable business deals in the 1950s and 60s, leading to some of those adverts, by the way. He was succeeded by someone called Enrique Sabatier, who, because of the threats against
was that Freudian then? Saboteur there, you almost said.
Well, no, it's because I always get mixed in with Sabates, who was Picasso's assistant. But no, Sabatier was Dali's assistant in the late 60s and early 70s. He started carrying a gun for Dali's protection, and Dali was extremely nervous around guns, and he was extremely worried about his situation. Because he was a Francoist, he was a dedicated Francoist. He had met Franco, he had painted, he's also a royalist, he had painted the royal family. And so he was living in Catalonia, which was not particularly supportive of Franco, or to a lesser degree, the royal family. So he was extremely nervous. He was in a very difficult position politically. And obviously, with the death of Franco, he was kind of left out on a limb because there were relatively few intellectuals or major public artistic figures in Spain willing to commit to the Franco regime. But he had been one of the few, and he was kind of left high and dry in sort of 76 or 75, whenever Franco died.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Because obviously knew that he was kind of liked Franco, but didn't realize it was that deep.
Yeah, he did a sort of relatively minor painting of Franco in the 50s, I think, 60s. Okay. And he also painted the royal family in the late 70s, well, mid 70s, just as he was sort of basically coming to the end of his painting career. Also, his health was in serious trouble. So I've talked about him possibly having Parkinson's. The tremor in his hand may also have come from medication that he was taking. The things were very bad with Gala. They would actually have physical fights. These two old people physically fighting each other, and they had to be separated. So it's kind of a bit grim. In the 1970s, I think, or the early 80s, he was made Marquis of Pubol by the king. So this was after Franco had died. And he bought a tower for Gala in Pubol. And this is the famous one where he had to get written permission from his wife to visit his wife at the tower.
Oof. I'd have just locked her in there. I realised, we thought the bow was cute. It's actually devil's horns across the truth.
Yeah.
You see, that's the concerned face. He's seeing Gala's demonic form.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. So Salvador Dali jewels. So if you go to visit Figueras, there was, I don't know if there is, but I think there was a museum called Dali Jewels. So that's it basically. Yeah, it's on the corner. And he made a lot of jewelry from the 1940s onwards. So basically, when he was in America onwards, was using precious materials. He didn't actually make them. He designed them, and they were made by craftsmen. So there's no shame in that, of course, because he wasn't a metalsmith. He was no goldsmith or silversmith. So he had to have these made for him. And so these are Dalinian forms. There's some religious imagery in there, of course, because of the polychrome religious statuary that you find in Catholic cathedrals, especially, or Catholic churches even, which you find especially in the Iberian Peninsula and also Italy.
Yeah, it's interesting because all of this does have that kind of Baroque, almost saint iconic style. So things like if you see the housing for relics, they have these kind of similar forms. I mean, I've seen these lips before. That's really beautiful and really well done and really imaginative. It's very cool. I mean, this is quite interesting, a bit freaky. The eye
watch is
very
quite
famous.
well known as well.
Yeah, this is lovely. That's really nice. But I guess that's Dali in this kind of best.
Yeah. So then that's another religious imagery from the 1950s. So there's sort of the hypercubic crucifix that some of you will know from the 1950s.
Yeah, I mean, this just reminds me of toast in the morning. The texture, he's captured the texture.
What's the material? Is it? It has the description under it. It's gold square. So yeah, gold squares surrounded by diamond encrusted spikes. Yeah. Platinum rays. Okay. Melting watches. Of course.
There's nothing worse. Just him riffing off his own previous stuff. This is quite clever. Again, they had the corset ring. So again, just like toying with the fact that, you know, why don't you have a corset for your hands? The ring in some ways is a corset of a type as well. So that's quite a witty piece. Yeah, this is.
So this one is actually motorized. There is a motor in the center, and the red cluster, the heart inside the heart, is supposedly supposed to beat. I don't think it was working when I was there. I think it's actually turned off most of the time anyway, even if it does work. But yeah, so here you have sort of like a mechanical addition to the jewelry.
Interesting.
Yep, the famous elephant that you saw from The Temptation of Saint Anthony, and the dream of a bumblebee.
More various bits.
Yeah. So I mean, these are. Oh, I mean, these are actually relatively quite attractive and inventive works. You'll find we're not really going to look at them, but the Salvador Dali prints of the 1960s and 70s are much less inventive and much less attractive than these. I hesitate to say that because I know that Radlib has a Salvador Dali print that he was given, I believe. So apologies to him.
And you're just wrecking it. Oh.
No. If he loves it, he loves it. But there is a lot of dross. I'm not saying that all of the prints from the 60s and 70s were dross, but we have to raise the issue of what happens with the prints. Is that this slide? Is that the next slide, or?
I think it's the next one. I want to talk through this jewelry a little bit more. I love this one here again, the skulls with the amethyst and stuff. Really, really nice. Less keen on. I like his use of lapis. I mean, there's just so much there. It's ridiculous, and it's just so blue. That's just like such a lovely bit of lapis. But it's kind of like
it's fantastic. It's fantastically expensive. I wonder if these. I presume that these were commissioned by jewelers with a client in mind before they got these made, because the cost of materials for these is pretty high.
It's just so much gold in there, isn't there? This is really cool. I like. I think the jewelry stuff is pretty reasonable, or again, pretty innovative and interesting. But it still feels like Dali. It's worst when it's him just like, hey, do you remember this guy from? Remember the elephant?
1931, yeah, it's a persistence of memory, 1931.
Yeah, still melting those watches, guys. But no, it's some pretty cool stuff.
Okay, so here we have the Zodiac suite. This is actually, I didn't realize that this is quite good. So in 1974, a van driving across the border to Andorra was stopped. Inside this van, they found 40,000 blank sheets of paper signed with the name Salvador Dali. Well, actually just Dali. So what had happened was, basically, Dali was supposed to do, he had signed a contract for something called the Zodiac Suite. He didn't complete it on time. He was supposed to draw the designs and then they were supposed to be printed, and he hadn't done this. Part of the law settlement, which Dali lost, required Salvador Dali to sign some blank papers so that this company could print the Salvador Dali designs on the paper. But of course, they wanted the signatures in the paper beforehand, because Salvador Dali had been a bit slack about producing the work. But the problem was that he basically got paid money for signing blank sheets of paper. And Salvador Dali being Salvador Dali and Gala being Gala, that led to a massive system of him signing blank sheets of paper and selling the sheets to forgers. And you have estimates of perhaps over 250,000 sheets of paper.
What? Quarter of a million?
Yeah, they had giant stacks, and he would sign about 3 or 4 prints in a minute. Just with he had pencils already. There was someone putting the sheet in front, taking it away, putting it in front, taking it away. So this was like a system. And at the end of the thing, the stack of paper was counted, and there was a pile of money, pile of banknotes was counted out in front of Salvador Dali. And of course, he's not paying tax on this. He's not declaring this. This is cash in hand. Gala loves it. So he gets involved in signing all these blank sheets of paper. And so what happens is these sheets are printed up with either Salvador Dali images or Dali-esque images, or stuff that really isn't Dali at all. And it's passed off as original because, of course, it's got an original signature. So it's got to be original. It's not. Now, in France, they have a specific definition of what an artist's print must be, and it's very exact. And so it's a big deal to forge them. Britain and America don't have these legal definitions of what an artist's print is. So what happens is that Salvador Dali is busted, and these companies are busted for producing, abetting forgery. And what happens is his reputation plummets, because suddenly people realize that this Salvador Dali print that they paid like $150, $200, $500 for on their wall is most likely a fake. And the majority of Dali prints are, I'm afraid to say, Radlib, are fakes. So certainly everything.
Probably not yours,
Probably from the 1960s to the 1980s, pretty much all of them are fakes.
Radlib, I choose to believe. You're the 1 in 250,000 that made it. I believe Radlib.
Yeah.
So
this seriously damages his reputation. We have fake paintings as well.
I've seen like a collection on like Don Quixote and stuff like that, and I did see stuff like people flogging them online and stuff like that. So I just assumed, that there was a lot of forgery going on.
He did genuinely make some prints. Don Quixote, and then there was Dante, and then there was also one for SNCF, the French rail company. And they're not terribly good. They're not terribly distinguished, but there are some genuine prints. And they're also overprints as well. So there's basically genuine prints that are kind of reprinted when they shouldn't be. They should actually be limited. There are genuine prints out there, but the majority are fakes.
There we go.
So this is just some examples. So this is something from so you remember in 1934, right at the end of the first stream, I mentioned that Salvador Dali had given his drawing to a master printmaker, and the printmaker had made this etching for him. And that's basically where he'd got involved with sort of handing over materials and asking people to sort stuff out for him. And
you can see the quality difference is wild. Again, they're getting the major shapes. Again, I wonder if they've just used like a light box or something like that to transfer it. But the blacks are just nowhere near as black as the originals. They're not able to do any of the shadows very well. It's a real shame. It does show it's worth investing in a quality etcher. There you go.
Yeah. So these are actually copies of originals. There are some that are not even copies. I mean, they're just sort of complete inventions that were not Dali's.
There you go.
Right. So this is the Tower of Pubol. This is where Gala lived.
So in
Dali,
the tower? Where?
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, it's,
In the dome in the egg at the top.
yeah. Although that I think that was actually original. I think that may be why he bought it. He decorated this building as well, where Gala lived, where she entertained her sort of series of young lovers. Yeah, so this is, and basically you can see he sort of found some stuff to put there. It's like sort of set dressing.
What is the?
I've no idea what those are.
3 bits of ermine, I think.
Possibly. So on the right, you can see basically a trompe l'oeil painting. Salvador Dali didn't paint that. One of his assistants painted it.
Oh,
yeah.
I quite like these little.
The lions, yeah. I imagine that
nice.
these are all sort of like 18th century, 17th century originals. Yeah.
I mean, I just love the pomposity to have like a regal chair.
I wonder if she ever actually sat in that. I feel like if I sat on that, I'd just probably fall off. I'd probably just like push the chair back a little bit, and I'd fall off the dais.
Yeah, it's so uncomfortable. And then sitting on top of it is this miniature, sex-obsessed, demonic nana who thinks she's literally brilliant. It's literally it's nightmare fuel. Lovely floor though, lovely tiles there. I know it's kind of like, so it's got a kind of kitsch vibe to it that I quite like. Again, I mean, anyone who just rocks a gold column,
not supporting anything.
Yeah, exactly. It's just bold. It's like they haven't even put the fabric on it. It's like down there. It's sort of attached on the side. Very strange.
Right. So here we have. This is the cellar of Pubol Castle. And this is where Gala is buried. Now, what can you see?
I can see a giraffe, 2 horses, and a torso of a man.
Yep. And what can you see in front?
Flowers. There's 2 tombs. Hold on.
Yeah.
Oh, she didn't get... Not one of her lovers.
No. This was supposed to be where Salvador Dali would be buried next to Gala. Gala died in 83, I think.
Okay.
And Dali wanted to be buried next to her side. This was actually constructed so there's actually a hole between the two of them so that they could reach. Well, I mean, the polite way we're saying is that he could reach his hand through to her, so they could clasp hands even in death, symbolically of speaking, of course. But Dali was not buried here. Gala was buried here. We'll get onto that in a bit.
My respect for Dali is massively plummeting, not because of the forging, just because of his sheer simping for his evil wife. Well, Dali is a simp.
But the definition of simp is crushing on a girl that you don't have access to. He did have access to her, which was, maybe worse than not having access to her.
That's true. Is there any? What's the giraffe? You gotta. Do we know?
He did do the burning giraffes in 1936, so that may be it. I think it's just something he found in a secondhand store.
It's just more random stuff.
It's tat, yeah. So here we have the Teatro Museum in Museo in Figueras. Figueras is basically where he grew up. Remember that Cadaqués on the coast was their holiday home. Figueras was where they spent most of their time. When Dali was young, Dali had his first exhibition in this theatre before the Civil War. Civil War came and it was badly damaged. So when Dali had a chance to acquire it in the 1960s, early 70s, the museum itself opened in 74. He decided to keep some of the holes, some of the shell holes in the structure. But I mean, the outside has been completely refurbished. These are, do you know what's on the outside?
It looks like...
No, it isn't.
Smurfs.
Oh, that was the polite thing to say. Very good. No, it's not Smurfs either. So these are types of bread. These are a typical Catalan bread. And above you have the giant eggs, symboling the sort of the incubation of genius.
Mm.
And this was designed as his theatre museum. So this would have his paintings. Now, artist museums are kind of curious things because you tend to end up with all the worst works in the artist museum. Because what happens is you end up with the very early pictures and the very late pictures. So the pictures that they didn't sell when they were young and the very old pictures that they kept because they were rich. But all the high period work, all the work that you know them for, has all been sold and it's all off in different museums. So this museum is, in fact, very similar to that. It's very strong on lots of early works, got lots and lots of late works, some of them even painted by Dali, but there's not much of the high period stuff. The Dali Museum in St. Petersburg, Florida, is the best collection of Dalis in the world.
Okay.
By quite some distance.
And you've been here, have you?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is
how would you rate it? Was it pretty good?
It's as an experience. It's unique. I mean, it is very interesting as an experience. If you're going there to see the best of Dali's work, then you're in the wrong place. You have to go to America for that. But it's a good experience. I would recommend people visit it. But the consistency of the paintings there is not great because you've got kind of an absence of the best paintings, especially the high period.
Okay.
We are inside the Theatre Museum, which opened in 1974. So you see that so you have like alcoves and stuff, which is kind of filled. So that's a drawing, sort of painted drawing on the left. So you've got pages from a book. He did many grand editions of books basically from the 1950s onwards. In the center, you have this sort of a painting of
Abraham Lincoln.
Gala at a window forming Abraham Lincoln.
It's the classics, the meeting of two evil people.
Yep. So then you can see the people there. That gives you a bit of a scale.
Yeah, it's pretty big. This is actually quite tasteful. I was expecting it to be way worse.
I mean, there are less tasteful parts.
Okay.
You can see some paintings. Like if you go to the top right, no, I can't. You can't see it there. Oh yes, actually, you can see a hand right there. That's a shaped painting. There are a number of shaped paintings, and they're not by Dali. They're by his assistants. But if you go to the website, if you go to any of the books, the complete books, they will say that these are by Salvador Dali. They're not Salvador Dali paintings. Now, the person who replaced Sabatier was someone called Robert Deschamps, another terrible manager. He basically took on battling fakes and forgeries. At the same time, he was authorizing the production of lots of particularly sculptures that were not by Dali, but were in his name. And then there was lots of hanky-panky about the editioning process, so the numbers didn't add up. And he wrote a book, basically the catalogue raisonné of the paintings and the sculpture, and of course he included all sorts of stuff that wasn't by him.
Just a quick question on managers in general. Before, would most artists of that time have a manager? I guess he's just so well known that he needed one. And then what is the role of a? I mean, do you have a manager, Alex?
No, I don't. I'm not well known enough for that. But Picasso, the most famous artist in the world, didn't have a manager. He had a secretary who he would send out to do certain things for him. He had various dealers, preferred dealers and preferred collectors, but they would have to go through his secretary. And he was basically, and Picasso was so rich, he didn't need to worry about that sort of thing. Also, Picasso didn't do things like adverts or films. He didn't do acting or anything like that. He was purely an artist, and he decided what he wanted to do. And he had certain trusted publishers and gallerists who came to him and said, "How about this? How about that?" Or he would go to them. He didn't need a manager. Dali was so scattershot, so eccentric, and he was doing so many things in so many areas. He was basically farming out his work to craftsmen, and he was doing adverts, he was doing acting, he was doing, appearing in What's My Line, he was posing for photographers and stuff. He was doing all sorts of stuff. So you don't need a manager. Gala liked it, of course, because it basically devolved. It took work away from her shoulders, and so Deschamps is a controversial figure, not least because he set up a company called Demart, and he got Salvador Dali to sign his copyright over to Demart.
Okay.
So can you see a conflict of interest here, where you're the manager, you set up a company to look after and to take money from the copyright of artists, basically one artist, and you get your boss to sign over his entire copyright to your company? Can you see a conflict of interest?
Okay, but I mean, it depends. If he owns, did he own the full company? Did he?
Deschamps owned it.
Okay.
The manager owned it. The manager got the money.
Well, I was just saying, if he created it, because you can sometimes do it as like a umbrella corporation where Dali would own it still. Sorry.
Oh, no. Dali wasn't terribly savvy about contracts. He just signed whatever was in front of him for money.
Oh.
And he basically signed away
Dali.
his copyright. Yeah.
Very sad. This is a sad story. Part 3, sad part. I want to go back to part 2, where he was just frolicking in America and messing around. This is
sad Pepe time, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Crying frog.
And so I presume, does that company today still leech off his work?
No. Basically, I think the state basically stepped in and said, cut this out, and it was handed over. So the rights are all now owned by the Gala Salvador Dali Foundation, based in Figueras. So it's gone back to his estate now.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got this video. Is this the museum again?
Yeah. So maybe you want to do this on sort of fast speed. So this is basically shots of the museum. That first shot was of the ceiling. There's actually a film of him actually painting that ceiling, being interviewed by Russell Harty, a famous 1970s talk show.
I've seen these bronzes before. Were those bronzes?
Those are the Deschamps ones. Some of them were made without Dali's knowledge. Some were made with his knowledge. These ones were, because these were for the museum, so he had control over these. But there's other stuff that was done without his knowledge.
Okay. That's
the inside of a tower that was left open, roofless. So that's another one of the stereoscopic paintings.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Galatea of Spheres that we saw earlier. That buxom figure was by a different sculptor. Again, that's made by assistants.
So yeah, just a lot of this late stuff where the assistants are just doing everything.
Yeah, so that's some of the jewelry. That's the Abraham Lincoln painting. Yeah, and that painting isn't by him either. Rainy Taxi, that's a recreation of the original.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of tat.
There is a lot of tat. It feels
that's a classic painting from the 1940s. Not many of those around. That's a classic painting from the 20s. Yeah. So basically, he had a whole museum to fill. That's not an original Michelangelo. Yeah, that's a classic painting from the 20s. So he basically had this entire museum to fill, and he didn't have enough stuff. So basically, he was getting his assistants to make a load of stuff, made recreations and stuff just to fill up the space. That was one of the last paintings that was ascribed to him, but I don't think it's by him.
That's the picture that's used for the Evola book.
Oh, is it? Yes. Oh,
yeah.
Yes. I've seen that. I was just checking it out on Amazon. Yes, so there was a hologram there, which I think we'll get to in a minute.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. This is not his best stuff, but some potentially interesting stuff.
That's
like
by
maybe
Anthony. That's by Anthony Pittrott. That stone picture, who was
Yeah.
one of his assistants. And you'll notice a similarity between those paintings and the paintings that are ascribed to Dali from about 1980. That last shot was of his tomb, and that tomb is in. There you are. So you got some people standing on his tomb.
I love it. Just some large American woman.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, what happened with? Well, we'll get to his death at the end, kind of fittingly at the end.
Okay.
Yeah. So here we have just a close up of that good quality image of the. So this is Abraham Lincoln with Gala Dali and the Christ of St. John.
Yeah, you got like a mini gala down here, little tiny Abraham as well.
So this is like a little retrospective, all in one.
Yeah.
Again, this was painted by assistants.
Yeah, you can tell actually.
It
feels different.
It's very flat, and this is okay. So this is the official last painting, 1983, Swallow's Tail. If you've seen films of him, he can't hold his hand steady. Can you imagine him painting these sort of very sweeping?
The whiplash curves just too hard.
Yeah, the delicate shading, and look at the coloration. You've got all these. It's gone basically blue. You've got this blue and the sort of red, and it's not. This is not Salvador Dali, but this is ascribed to him. This is the last book, last painting you'll find in his catalogues. The museum says it's by him. The catalogue raisonné says it's by him. It's not by him.
Is this who is there like a different camp, like a couple of different camps for people who like?
Well, there's me and Ian Gibson. Ian Gibson's his biographer, and he said that the assistants were doing a lot of the painting at the end. I completely agree. All the officials say no, this was by him, but clearly he wasn't capable of doing this. He couldn't write a sentence. He couldn't sign his. He couldn't. You look at his signature. His signature's a scroll. This is not painted by him.
I think it's interesting because it's like. Probably if you can't draw a straight line at this point, like there's none of this that could have been him as well. Do you know what I'm saying? It's not like he even did a little bit, because there's again it's just so angular and structured. But
and it's very refined. It's very carefully made. I don't think much of it is a work of art, but so this was a late photograph of Dali in the early 80s, I think. So what happened was.
He still looks great though. I just want to like he ages very well. I think you can say that about Dali. And again, still great moustache game. Sorry, please carry on. So this is Gala died in I think it was 83, and basically he stopped painting, and he also starved himself. He decided he was not going to eat. He was going to achieve immortality by dehydrating himself. He was going to become like an Egyptian mummy. He was going to dehydrate himself and last forever. This didn't really work out, so he had to be fed by an intravenous drip for the last 6 years of his life. Oh my goodness, you're kidding me?
No,
that is so weird. 6 years.
He refused to eat. So he was. As far as I know, he was fed by intravenous drip. And he was basically bedbound for the last 6 years because he had no energy. He was extremely underweight. What happened was there was also a fire. I think it was in 86. And basically he retired from public life in 83. So there was a fire. He was now living in the Figueras. He was living in his own museum, and away from the public. I'm not sure if the public actually knew he was there, but he was in
living
this,
one of the eggs at the top. We saw.
something like that. And he was a cantankerous so-and-so, and he used to play with his call button because apparently there was some loose wiring in it, and he liked to see the electricity. He liked to see the spark inside the sort of little clicker that he used, and so he liked to play with that. And obviously his nurses, his carers, kind of basically ignored it because he was being a bastard, and he was messing them around, and so he obviously didn't want them. He was just sort of playing little games to see the sparks. Unfortunately, it set off a fire. It set his bed on fire, and no one came to help him because they thought he was just screwing around. So he got very severely burned before anyone realized what was going on. So they broke it. They went into his bedroom because he was in his normal bed, and they basically put out the fire, and they rushed him to hospital. And and he only just survived. And so again, he spent his last 3 years. He died in 1999. Yeah,
this is like torture levels. Do you know what I'm saying?
This is awful.
6 years of IV, 3 years heavily burnt.
Yeah, and he's locked away from the world. He doesn't do anything public. He doesn't make any art. He doesn't see his old friends. Not that he had that many good friends anyway, but he doesn't see anyone hardly at all. He's basically locked. He's not locked up in his tower, but he can't. He's not immobile. He has to go out. If he's going anywhere, he goes in a wheelchair. So he's not able to leave anyway, and he's basically imprisoned in this room in a tower in his own museum for the last 6 years of his life. Sort of a shriveled, burnt wreck of a man, and it's
so dark,
really pitiful. It's really pitiful.
Yeah, it's really sad.
Yeah.
And all over Gala as well. I just feel like the it's 4 p.m. Meme where it's got like this kind of emaciated Wojak on the right and a well-endowed woman on the left, and she's forcing Wojak to work. Gala is that woman. It's 4 p.m. Salvador. Make me some money for my lovers.
Well, yes. I mean, he was also. I mean, he was a masochist also, because he didn't mind her having affairs. He didn't mind her doing that sort of thing, and he was getting up to his own stuff as well. We haven't really covered it, but 1960s Salvador Dali's Portuguese house, which is where he was living at the time, became a stop for the hippies. So the hippies would take drugs and they'd go along the beach, because this was beachfront property, and they might see Salvador Dali, and Salvador Dali would chat with them, and they would basically take off their clothes and have sex in front of him. So he wasn't exactly pure as the driven snow either.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what happened was Salvador Dali dies in January, I think it was 1989. And his body is hijacked. This is even worse. This gets even worse. So basically what happened was Salvador Dali wanted to be buried in Pubol next to Gala. The mayor of Figueras said Salvador Dali wants to be buried in his own museum. So everyone says, oh, really? He said that? And the mayor says, yeah, he said that to me. Definitely. He definitely said that to me. And people believe him. So they bury him in the museum. So Figueras gets to keep the museum and all the art. I mean, it doesn't own it, but it's in their property, in their city. Yeah. And they also get the body as well. And the body is kind of like buried in the basement of the Teatro Museo. And people walk over it because they don't know what's there.
It's the ultimate insult. It's just literally annoying tourists not understanding his work. Yeah. Walking over you every single day with your body.
I was there. I mean, when I was there, I knew what it was, so I didn't walk on it. But I stood there and I was sort of like looking at it, being quite sort of thoughtful. And there were people just wandering over it because they didn't know.
I guess that happens. And if you go to a church or a cathedral, there's loads of these old flag stones and stuff, and
Yeah.
You know, they have all of their names worn away by time, but this is literally, I mean, that's just a real evil move again. Not even to say that Salvador's there. Do you know what I'm saying? That's the
Yeah. And the thing is that it was quite clear in his will that he wanted to be buried in Pubol, but the mayor, if the mayor says that, you know, he sort of he whispered in his ear just as he was dying, "I want to be buried in your town." Oh, okay, Salvador, I'll tell everyone. Yeah, no one else knew about this. This is completely invented.
Oh dear. And there we go. That is the end of Dali. That's a very dark ending there.
That's so grim. I'm sorry about that.
Any last thoughts at all?
No. Basically, it's a cautionary tale. I think you have someone who starts off as a brilliant technician, a very original man, a talented artist, a visionary in a way. He's part of a major art movement, but it is true that he became corrupted by money in the 1930s by America, not specifically by America, but by money that was available that just happened to be in America. He kind of degraded himself. He was diverted into all sorts of side projects that were sort of ranged from the amusing to the humiliating. He debased himself and he debased everyone around him for money, for sex, for morality. He broke lots of laws. Some of them, you know, voluntarily, you know, to do with like sort of tax and he became a clown or a parody of himself, and I think that has overshadowed his work. But
what you're saying is that Raphael did the best thing by killing himself, by dying, so that he couldn't ultimately sell out. Do you know what I'm saying? Everyone thinks of Raphael as this brilliant artist. If he lived as long as Dali did, he'd be, you know, selling out to the Medici. You know.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah. Well, Dali died aged 85. I mean, he hadn't painted for a good few years, and actually, if you think about when he really stopped painting, he stopped painting in the mid 70s.
Yeah.
But in terms of artistic output, you could say, well, you could. I mean, if you want to be really sort of hyper purist about it, you could say his best paintings were from 1928 to 1934 or 36. Well, it's 36, maybe Autumnal Cannibalism and Premonition of Civil War in 36. You could say his mature career lasted, 8 years, right at the beginning, and then there's nothing else. I think that's a little bit. I think that's
that's harsh. I like the I really like the Mystic series, but there's not a huge amount of work there. But no, that was really interesting. And Alex, thank you so much for taking us through on a very turbulent journey. But I learnt a huge amount, so thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's been like giving an oral exam on a subject that I haven't studied for 10 years. So I am sure I've missed out all sorts of stuff. I haven't. This is not D length. I'm afraid not Mr. D length. So I mean, because his masterful Warhol series is much more thorough than this. But I think it's kind of nice to have like a sort of a brisk canter through one of the giants' lives in 3 2-hour episodes.
Yes, definitely. Just to kind of finish off, what's your favourite Dali painting?
I think it would be something. I think it might be something like Autumnal Cannibalism from 1936, which I think we did. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it would be something like that, or maybe something from the early 30s. But yeah, what about you?
I do really love the Christ looking down on the cross at the earth. Again, I think that's very, very iconic. So
that's the best of the post-war paintings, I think, for sure.
Yeah. Yep. Apologies that Panama wasn't able to make it. I haven't heard from him, but I'm assuming that he's stuck somewhere and not able to get internet. So apologies for that.
He was, yeah. So we should say that he was going to talk specifically about Franco and Spanish politics, and sort of, I think, probably about sort of Catalan separatism and the royal family and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry that he couldn't join us. I've sketched out some of those things briefly, but he knows the subject better than me in terms of history.
Maybe next time we'll get him to do a little bit of some crib notes or something on some of that stuff. So just in terms of next time, we were talking about looking potentially at the Orientalists, or maybe doing a one-off. I think we haven't decided what specifically yet, but there will be, don't worry, there will be more art soon. But in the meantime, Alex, what have you been up to? Obviously lots of stuff going on with the event, but anything else you'd like to plug or highlight?
I think maybe the thing that I could direct you to is I did a stream with Stephen Carson and Mr. D, John D, on the unique qualities of the fine art market. So we talk about art qualifications, auctions, galleries, state intervention in the production of art and so forth. And that was a fun stream that lasted about, I think, 2.5 hours or something. So if anyone wants to go over to see that on YouTube, it is the Radical Liberation channel. And that was a fun stream.
I feel like Radlib was just pumping you guys for information for his daughter, who is obviously trying to make it into the
yeah, sure.
World,
She's very skilled. I saw some pictures that he shared, and he's got a miniature Salvador Dali on his hands.
We'll see. Only time will tell.
Let's hope she never engages in any of the depraved behaviour that we've actually largely omitted to talk about, which I'm quite pleased about.
Yeah.
The information, if you want that information, go to documentaries on YouTube by Ian Gibson and Brian Sewell, separate documentaries, and they outline the private life of Salvador Dali.
Okay, there we go. And anything else at all that's happening, or?
No, well, we've got the event coming at the end of the month.
It's in 2 weeks' time, isn't it?
Yes, sorry. So you have to book very soon if you're listening to this as we record or shortly after, because that's the last weekend of August. So you can go to Shieldings or Skyldings.
Yeah, if you I'll put it in the description. I'll update the description to include it. The tickets are quite expensive, but that is the price you have to pay to get access to Alexander Adams. He's that exclusive, and it'll be worth every single penny I can assure you. I will also be there. We've got some great guests.
Panama's going to be there as well.
Panama's going to be there. We'll do a little mini meetup for anyone who's interested. Maybe have a drink together. So if you can afford it, it will be really interesting and really worth your time.
Oh, by the way, we should mention there is also a book coming out.
Yes. So if you don't want to make it, or if you live in America, it's £50, I think, or $50, and it's going to have all of the talks in there, and should be really good. I think that's basically it from my side as well. Please make sure you subscribe. If you could just leave a comment, we'd really appreciate it as well. Does wonders for the algorithm, and also I'd love to hear about what your guys' thoughts were on the best advertisement for Dali. So please leave your
thanks. Thanks for all the comments in the chat as well. We've been watching those, so thanks for those.
Yeah, I couldn't find any questions specifically, so do leave your questions in the comments in the video, and we'll try and read some of them out. So I think with that we'll leave it and say goodnight, and thank you very much.
Cheers.